Welcome back to the First and Goal podcast, everyone, on a Tuesday night. I am Sam Levine, joined by Mitch Weinberg, and it has been a very busy last couple of days. We've seen a lot of free agent signings right from the get-go. As soon as the clock struck noon, we saw a lot of free agent signings, and pretty much the majority of the top 20 guys gone, majority of the top 30 guys gone. There are a lot of guys signed, but no team has made bigger strides overall in the first couple of days than the New England Patriots. And that is a little bit surprising because they have not been big spenders in recent history. But this year, they're going all out. They are signing a lot of players. And here in day two, they are already, before officially free agency has started, they are already $10 million away from giving out the most guaranteed money in a single offseason.
I mean, the Patriots, I think they might be listening to this podcast. They're taking what I'm saying personally. I keep repeating this. The only division that is probably going to be a lock win is the AFC East. They heard that, and Bill Belichick's like, no, I'm not listening to this kid, and we're going to go out and sign most big names. Matthew Judon, Hunter Henry, John Smith, and surprisingly Cam Newton, just to name a few. But I'm very curious as to see where the Patriots are actually going to go with this next year. When you look at their defense is mainly still intact, but we have to more so look at the offense that was so poor last year. Signing two vertical, really good tight ends. This is not going to be a knock against Hunter Henry or John Smith, but maybe you should sign a wide receiver. Like that's just a suggestion that I think you should probably consider, Bill. I think that the Patriots haven't had such an elite wide receiver, I want to say, in 3 years. Julian Edelman is slowly falling out of his really there's a point where he's really good, and it stopped quite recently, probably a year before Tom left New England, and then it's now just been left in shambles. And similar to the running back situation, they don't have such a great running back one. They have a few guys, Damian Harris, coming up and coming, but no guy that really strikes you on that offense.
Yeah, for sure. And what I think this team is trying to really do is we saw during that 2010 to 2012 period. I know it didn't go as well as the Patriots hoped, but they tried to build that offense using that two tight end set with Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski. And that didn't, of course, for obvious reasons, last as long as they hoped. But getting Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith is kind of the same idea. I feel like two bigger bodied receiving threat tight ends, vertical guys, but also have very good red zone presence. This is how the Patriots like to win games. This is how they like to build their offense with big bodied tight end guys, right? Even you look at Julian Edelman. He's not a big bodied guy. That's not the point I'm trying to make, but he's a reliable player. He's a reliable receiver. That's the type of player that he is. That's the type of player that Hunter Henry is, Jonnu Smith, Rob Gronkowski is. Those are the type of players that the New England Patriots like. So in this aspect, I really like this fit because this is the type of player that the New England Patriots have had success with. Regardless of whether it's two tight ends, these two guys are receivers. These guys are coming in to New England to be receiving threats. So in that sense, you look at it, these two guys are the exact type of players that the Patriots have had success with in the past. So I think it makes a lot of sense. And also from a receiver standpoint, I think Nelson Aguilar, one of the more underrated receivers in this free agency cycle. Is he a wide receiver one? No, I think he's a good wide receiver two. Slot guy, can be productive as a second option on your team. Kendrick Bourne, another good contributing player. But like you said, they're missing that wide receiver one. So that's going to be something that is going to be very interesting to see if they can maybe pull off a signing for Kenny Galladay, if they are even in the mix for him, or potentially go the draft route because they are at pick 15. They could still get a very good player at that spot.
Kenny Galladay, I actually haven't heard so much. I figured that would have been the guy that within like the next yesterday, today, would have heard 100%, at least rumors, but it might have been just me. But I didn't hear all too much. And Nelson Aguilar, a guy we talked about a few episodes ago, I really liked him. He's a deep threat. He's so underrated. It seems corners forget to even guard him because I believe he was hovering around 18 yards per catch, which was top 3 in the league this year. And Bill Belichick and the Patriots, if there's the one thing you cannot say about them is Bill Belichick doesn't know what he's doing. Bill Belichick, he knows what he's doing. If Bill Belichick is giving a player trust and signing them or giving them a second chance, there's obviously a reason. Look, Cam Newton didn't look so good last year, and there's no denying that. But if Bill Belichick, the greatest coach in the history of the National Football League, is giving you a second chance, he must really see something. Because Belichick hits some things, he misses others. But beyond this year, as the head coach of the Patriots, he has not failed to exceed expectations in the 20 years. And the defense is something that Bill Belichick's been good at, even when he was a defensive coordinator for the Giants. He's always found success defensively. He's a defensive mastermind. I think signing Jonnu Smith was excellent, excellent. And the defense is now looking better than honestly. Now it's looking scarier. Now it's looking like a defense that is ready to contend. The offense, I think that Aguilar and Edelman and Jacoby Myers, like that's a group of wide receiver twos. It's not a group of wide receiver ones, but it's and the two vertical tight ends, big vertical tight ends. Bill Belichick loves that type of football. He's been trying to make that mold since he started as the Patriots coordinator. Big body guys airing it out. He doesn't like to run it. I think this year was a bit of an experiment year, kind of. But now he's like, that's it. We're going back to the Patriot way.
Yeah, and touching on a point that you mentioned earlier, Bill Belichick is a no nonsense guy, and he's not just going to bring around players that were not good for no reason. He's not a guy that's just going to be like, all right, you aren't a good player, but you know what? We're not going to be able to get any better than you, so we'll just wait a year and try our luck next year. That's not who Bill Belichick is. If he thinks you weren't good enough, you will not be on the roster. I truly believe that. That's clearly the vibe that I feel like everyone gets from Bill Belichick at this point throughout his entire tenure. So clearly there was something that Belichick saw in Cam, right? And honestly, I don't think Cam was so bad to the point where you say, all right, yeah, that guy was the worst quarterback in the league. He can't be on a roster next
That's a
season.
low bar though for worst quarterback in the league.
Yeah. But but overall, I think he just didn't have a lot of help. And well, I don't think I can point to that and say that was the entire reason he didn't succeed, because overall he just wasn't that good. But I mean, like you said, he was throwing to wide receiver twos. Julian Edelman was also banged up throughout the course of the season. You have guys like N'Keal Harry, who is not good. Jacoby Myers, who came on at times during the season, wasn't really good or consistent enough to say he was a true wide receiver one, even though he did show very good games. I just don't think he is. Cam was assessed fairly and in a situation to be assessed fairly. So going forward, now you got your big bodied, reliable tight ends. And also, Cam Newton was very successful with Greg Olsen, who is also another big bodied receiving threat tight end. So now Cam has two of those guys, should be looking to get more success in that area, adding two wide receivers to that room as well in Aguilar and Bourne. So listen, well, he may not have that true top 10, top 15 wide receiver at the moment. He got a lot more help, and we are just right before the start of free agency. We still don't even know the entire signings for every team. We still have no idea who anyone is going to draft. So at this point, looks like Cam Newton is going to have the help he needs to potentially succeed in 2021.
I think the Patriots, that I saw it in episode of Gridiron Heights. Bill Belichick says we're not rebuilding, we're reloading, and that is exactly what the Patriots are doing. They are reloading this roster. And we look back to MVP Cam Newton 2015. Who was their best receiver that year? That was not a team that had a wide receiver one. They had Greg Olsen. I don't know if DJ Moore was there at that time, but
He was not.
there was somebody that was there. He was banged up that year during the Super Bowl run. Jonathan Stewart, who is the best running back in Panthers history, but hardly even a top 15 tight end in that year. So like I think that Cam Newton doesn't really need a wide receiver one. I think he needs a tight end, and he's shown that time and time again throughout his career. And I just don't even know we know what Cam Newton's ceiling is, because truthfully in 2015 he hit literally the ceiling. So I'm not saying he's going to be 2015 Cam. No one is saying this, but we know what he can be. We know his max potential. He was a Heisman winner. This guy is getting a second chance from Bill Belichick, the guy that is unforgiving. In my opinion, he's unforgiving. So he sees something. And if we look at his chart from NFL Next Gen Stats, like, he just didn't have a great passer rating all around the board. He was above average in two zones, below average in two zones, and just average everywhere else. His TD-INT ratio last year was 8-10, and we mentioned injuries and COVID. That's what it was last year. It was a tough year overall in the league, COVID injuries. So Cam maybe wasn't given such a fair shot. I think it's pretty fair to say, and so were a lot of other players that were probably misjudged.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. But overall, like we said, 4 new receiving threats. He also got a big help in Trent Brown, offensive tackle, is very good player there. And also, I'm getting a lot of comments or just DMs on the Instagram page about, well, they lost Joe Thuney, or I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but I think it's
You
Thuney.
said how it's spelled, so it's good
Yeah,
enough.
so yeah, they lost Joe Thuney. So what about that? Well, Joe Thuney didn't actually play in 2020. He opted out. So it's not like Cam is going to be losing the production of Thuney's. He never had it to begin with. So also they have Michael Onwenu at that spot, who was a breakout star.
Underrated.
Very
Underrated.
underrated. He is an exceptional interior offensive lineman. Very, very good player who has filled in for Joe Thuney at that role since Thuney opted out in 2020. So really not losing the production there from that standpoint. But overall, I think Cam, we agree, is in a situation to succeed in 2020. Will he be able to do it? That is a different question. But I think the pieces are there for him to potentially have success. So moving on, let's talk about free agency in a wider scope. Just overall, the best signings so far. Mitch, give me your absolute best signing to this point.
Well, I mean, there's a ton of really great signings. And you know what? I'm going to steal the one that you were probably going to take. We're going to take Leonard Williams' contract. We talked about it numerous times, week in, week out. What is Leonard Williams going to look like? We know how much he means to the Giants, which right now they signed John Ross. Interesting choice. I think it makes sense system-wise. So I think the defense is phenomenal. And Leonard Williams openly said he wasn't going to sign the franchise tag. He said, "You're going to give me the contract or that's going to be the end of us." And the Giants paid up their end of the bargain. They gave him the contract he deserved. And I have no gripes. I think, and I don't think there's a single issue. He was due for the franchise tag, I think was 20-ish million,
19.
19 million. He got 3 years, $61 million. Great, great contract for a guy that absolutely deserves it.
Yeah, and think back to a couple episodes. Bold prediction. I said Leonard Williams would be paid over $18.5 million. And look at that. That ended up coming true. So pat myself on the back a little bit there as we move on. But also another big thing to note, his cap hit was set to be $19 million on the franchise tag this year. But with the new contract, the way that it's structured, his cap hit will only be $11 million for 2020, which gives the Giants some cap flexibility going forward. That is a big thing. However, that is not one of the things or the contracts that I put down, because I went back and forth a little bit on this, because yes, it is $11 million. However, $61 million averaging out annual average, still about $20 million per year. While it is a good contract and definitely something that the Giants needed to get done, little bit too hefty of a price to say it was the best signing overall for me. So one of the biggest signings or best signings for me, maybe the best at this point, is going to be John Johnson, the third, to the Cleveland Browns on a 3-year, $33 million deal at this point. You look at this deal and wow, the Cleveland Browns get the best available safety on an $11 million contract. That is a steal. John Johnson can do it all. Every season of his career where he's been entirely healthy, he's had over an 80 PFF grade, which is very, very good. That puts him pretty much in the top 10 every single season. And this season, he finished as a top 3 player overall by PFF standards. He is an exceptional tackler as well. Exceptional tackler. He can play both safety positions, which is obviously great. Versatility is very much valued in today's NFL. He's just an exceptional player. Just an exceptional player that is probably the third best player on that Rams team overall, right behind Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. This is a guy that is going to come right in, fill a hole on that Browns defense perfectly, and just be another exceptional piece, an exceptional player to add to that Cleveland Browns team that will greatly improve their defense for the next 3 years or more if they decide to resign after that, but at least 3 years.
Absolutely. I think John Johnson, again, one of the more, in my opinion, one of the more underrated players. There's a lot of guys that are free agents that you guys may be thinking, oh, why are they getting such big deals? It's because they're underrated and teams notice. And John Johnson is, again, one of the more underrated players. And you look at the Browns secondary, a really, really good safety is something I think the Browns have been missing for a long, long time, especially considering they're in a division where they're contending. They're not a guaranteed. They're not going to get the guaranteed win. Like I said, the Bills probably will. But you look at the Ravens, you look at the Steelers, the Browns are still in that contention where they can still win this and they can still pull it off. And I don't think it's too far-fetched. And signing John Johnson, a guy that will make this is a big impact player, it just makes sense. And there's nothing wrong about the deal.
For sure. So, Mitch, gave 2 for each best and worst. Who is your second or one of your other best signings so far to this point?
This is one of my favorite signings. A guy that contract most people, if they know me well enough, probably wouldn't assume I wouldn't end up picking. But I think Ronald Darby to the Denver Broncos is just exceptional. Like cut AJ Bouye, too much money there. So they decide, you know what? Let's go with a guy that's been on 2 teams. I believe he was on the Bills and he was also on the Washington football team this season. Could be wrong. But this is a guy that's proven. And the Denver Broncos, as much as I like the crap on them for not being too good, I think that there's some hope. And George Payton is being somewhat active in free agency. He's doing his best. And he knows what Denver needs. And they may not be contending right away, but this is 3 years, 3 years and annual average of 10 million because it's a 3-year, $30 million deal. And this is a Denver defense that has shown they're no joke. Their offense may be a joke, but their defense is no joke.
Yeah, I definitely like that signing too because Darby wasn't great with the Eagles before he signed with Washington.
Oh, it was the Eagles. Oof, I forgot.
Well, he was also on the Bills, so you got that one right. But wasn't great with the Eagles, especially in his last year. Just wasn't anything special. But here, flying under the radar with Washington, really contributed to one of the best defenses in the NFL and earned himself a 76 overall Pro Football Focus grade, which is a very respectable grade. Flew under the radar a little bit. Nice signing by the Denver Broncos. But one of the guys that I have here, we talked about a couple episodes on the wide receiver review episode. That's going to be Marvin Jones to the Jaguars. And now for the Jaguars to get not only Marvin Jones's production, but his veteran presence and his expertise of being in the NFL. He's over 30 at this point. They got all of that for their young superstar quarterback in Trevor Lawrence for only $7 million per year. $7 million per year. And they're going to get a guy who is very experienced, is still a very, very good and very productive wide receiver. He almost got over 1,000 yards this season on the Lions. You not only give Trevor Lawrence a guy like that, but you also give DJ Chark and Laviska Shenault, an older veteran mentor who knows how to get it done at a very high level. He's going to help those 2 guys develop, and he's also going to give Lawrence a very reliable and a very good target on the outside. Now you have a very solid wide receiver core and DJ Chark, who has solid wide receiver 1 potential. You have Laviska Shenault, who's I don't want to call him a gadget player, but he can do everything as a skill position player for you, more of a slot wide receiver as well. And then stick Marvin Jones right on the outside, plug and play type of player. Very talented guy. I love this signing. I absolutely love it. I'm all in on this signing, and I think it benefits everyone in Jacksonville.
Well, no, absolutely. I think this was one of the better signings. When I saw it today, I'm like, oh wow, that makes perfect sense. He's gonna fit right in. It just makes sense. But the only thing I'm gonna say about Jacksonville, they haven't gone out and got any defense. And again, it's technically like still early. It opened yesterday, but it's been pretty action packed. They have to go after a defensive guy because their offense this year, just looking at the weapons wise, I wouldn't say to keep it, but if they did, like it probably would have been disappointing, but not the end of the world. Their defense right now is what needs help. And we look at a bunch of the remaining free agents, they're missing out. They've missed out on a lot of guys that they probably could have benefited from. And they have a lot of young guys. And I think that they need to sign defense immediately, like immediately. And that's not even something that's like contested. Hassan Reddick's still available. Clowney, Anthony Harris, KJ Wright, a bunch of guys that young stars, if you end up drafting them, can learn from and benefit from. Because Jacksonville, they may not be in win now mode, but even if they are, having veteran guys, that helps the team. It's experience. They need experience. That's what the Jacksonville Jaguars were missing last year. And there's a ton of guys in this free agent pool that may not make immediate impact, but progression and young stars, their potential could be very well impacted by signing a bunch of those guys.
Yeah, they did sign, I will say, the biggest signing
Oh,
probably
Shaq
other than
Griffin.
Shaq Griffin. However, $15 million per year on an annual average for Shaq Griffin. I'm not sure I'm in love with that one. Quite as much as the Marvin Jones deal. But we'll leave that at that because Shaq Griffin's still a solid player. So we'll wait and see. But moving on to worst signings so far, let's do one each for worst signings so far. I had Andy Dalton here, but I decided to go with someone else because I feel like that's too obvious at this point. I'm going to go with Leonard Floyd for the Rams. And don't get me wrong, I like this player, but $16 million per year for Leonard Floyd. I mean, Leonard Floyd is a good player. 10.5 sacks this season. He had a 3-sack game, I believe, so that inflated his stats a little bit too. Also playing on an defensive line with Aaron Donald, so that helps with block sheds. But overall, Leonard Floyd, a good player, a solid player. But $16 million, I mean that you're okay, when you pay a guy $16 million, you're basically saying that guy's a cornerstone on my defense. Do I think Leonard Floyd is a cornerstone on the Rams defense? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If he left the Rams, would I think, all right, the Rams defense is going to drop from number 1 in the league to number 7 or 8? No, I wouldn't, because there are a bunch of good edge rushers in the draft. You could sign another one for vastly cheaper that won't be as productive, but will help your defense not decrease so poorly. So paying a guy $16 million when you already have the least salary cap in the NFL, to me, is baffling. I hate this contract. I absolutely hate it. And if it was going to take $16 million overall to bring in Leonard Floyd, I wouldn't have done it in the first place.
Yeah, I could see you're very much fuming over this contract. Also, I like to credit the Saints for absolutely swerving the living hell out of that cap space. Like, oh my God, they did everything right. They did everything right. There's nothing I can say the Saints did wrong, except for maybe like re-sign Jameis Winston in the Taysom Hill contract, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm sorry it's come to this, but the one thing, if I've learned anything over the past few free agencies, there's one position to not overpay at. It is running backs. And I'm sorry, I love Aaron Jones. I think he's phenomenal. I think he's a top 10 running back in the league. But the Packers drafted A.J. Dillon last year. So I just think it's an overall bad, just confusing thing. Because now you wasted that second round pick on a potential wide receiver pick. Like, I think that if they didn't take A.J. Dillon last year, I wouldn't really have a problem with it beyond the fact they're overpaying for a running back. It's not overpaying for Aaron Jones. It's the positional group. But, like, I don't know that you're so happy with this. I can't imagine. I mean, I'm sure you're happy to have him back on the roster, but 4 years, $48 million. Look what happened to Christian McCaffrey. Look what happened to Zeke. The Giants are now thinking, oh God, what are we going to do with Saquon? And I'm not saying Aaron Jones is going to injury. I hope he doesn't. But I don't know that paying that much money for a running back is so worth it.
All right, Mitch, let's have a discussion, okay?
Hmm hmm
Let me educate you for a second, okay?
I'm about to get sauce.
Since when can a team only have one good player at a position? Let's
Mhm.
just look at the Packers, okay? Aaron Jones has had, I believe, somewhere around, this is just estimates, 650 carries throughout his career so far in Green Bay. It may be 550. I'm not sure, but it's either 550 or 650. Jamal Williams has had either 400 or 550. It's whatever it is. Jamal Williams has had around 150 less carries than Aaron Jones since they both entered the league. Okay. Jamal Williams is the one leaving free agency and no one is talking about. And Aaron Jones is the one who just got paid $12.5 million. AJ Dillon is about to become that bruiser on the Packers offense. He's about to become that type of guy, a guy that will balance out the scales between the carries between Jones and Dillon. They will get pretty much equal carries. And I think that is perfect. Aaron Jones, very athletic, very elusive, very fast. That is something that if you let Aaron Jones leave, the Packers do not have. Aaron Jones is the only guy on that offense who can do that. He is the only type of player that the Packers have that is that player. AJ Dillon, I wouldn't call him at this point a 3-down running back. Aaron Jones, 100% is. Aaron Jones can also be a 3rd-down running back. Well, I don't think that will be his role. He is very good at playing that role. So, while, yes, A.J. Dillon is a very good player, the Packers have always used multiple running backs. Even when they had Eddie Lacy, the rookie of the year, they also had James Starks. They have always used multiple running backs. This is how the Packers operate. This is how their team works. So signing Aaron Jones makes 100% sense to me. It makes 100% sense. And while as a Packers fan, I know that maybe they could have used that money to sign a wide receiver. Maybe they could have used that money to sign a cornerback or an interior defensive lineman. I still think it's money well spent because if you really want to, you can restructure Aaron Jones's or Aaron Rodgers' contract to get $17 million back. You can restructure Zadarius Smith's contract to get $8 million back. That will give you about $24 million or $25 million in cap space to do whatever you want. And while I'm not suggesting you spend all of that, it gives you some room to work. It gives you room to work. So I think this Aaron Jones signing works because he is not just some running back that is completely replaceable on this offense. He has a bona fide role. He has a real role that works, and it is contributed to the Packers' success very much so. And it's what he does. It's not that he's just a good running back. It's what he does on this Packers offense specifically that helps them succeed. So I know I rambled on for a little bit at that point, but I just don't see how you can call that the worst signing at this point.
Okay, I don't. I think I kind of overstretched. Like we're talking worst signing. I just don't think it's an overall like great signing. I think no. Again, this is nothing against Aaron Jones. It's about the monetary value. Because I have nothing bad to say against Aaron Jones. I think the Packers offense would not at all be the same. And sure, having two back sets, not two back sets, but literally just two backs. Some of the more the better teams do have two backs. But I know what happens when you overpay for a running back. I'm not saying it's not gonna pan out, but overpaying for running backs, I think it's just historically shown that it's not the greatest choice. And I think Aaron Jones needs to stay in Green Bay. I did not think it would have been in the best interest of the Packers front office if he left. And sure, Miami would have loved to have him, but it's a good thing he's in Green Bay. I'm just not in love with the signing. It's just the monetary value. Again, literally nothing against Aaron Jones, nothing against the decision to keep him. It's just the monetary value. That is my only issue, besides like maybe AJ Dillon, but I think that's fair. I didn't know Jamal Williams is a free agent this year, so.
Yeah, kind of tough. They were in the same draft class, but kind of tough. I love Jamal Williams. He's a great hype guy and a good overall just player, but he
Aaron
just
Rodgers is the ultimate hype guy. I don't know what you're talking about. That
well,
guy,
no, yeah,
oh, he's
no.
fired up always.
Yeah. But Jamal Williams, coming from a Packers fan, definitely a fan favorite. We all love him. But also Aaron Jones, his this year contract, or I think overall annual average, is actually $9.5 million and can get up to 12 and a half with incentives. So that's also something to watch, which I'm not exactly sure what the incentives are. I'm not 100% clear on that, but interesting to see if he actually does hit that because the Packers aren't projected to have the most salary cap space going forward. So that could be a big deal. So moving on, we have a little bit more of a fun segment going on here as we get into March Madness in college basketball. Me and Mitch decided to do something that we think is going to be very, very fun here. We are going to go through the entire March Madness bracket here for the remaining time that we have in this podcast. We're going to go through every single matchup as if the teams were the college football teams. So as we see here, Gonzaga, number 1 seed in the West. Instead of basing it off the Gonzaga basketball team, we're going to do it as if it was the Gonzaga college football team. So, I'm sure you can guess, a lot of stuff is going to be shaken up. So, we think this is going to be a fun segment as we kind of cross over between basketball and college football. So, kicking it off with Gonzaga. So, they are going to be playing a play-in game. So, for easiness sake, since we don't know the outcomes of the first 4, let's just say it's Appalachia, or actually, let's pick the four. But
App
I think it's
State.
going to
I
be
don't
App State.
think it's
Yeah,
at all close.
I don't see how Norfolk State is going to beat App State because App State, they're a top 25 team, I believe.
Well, they're like a top 50 team, and Norfolk State, like, even if there's a top 50 rank, I wouldn't put them in there. So,
Yeah, for sure. And I'm actually pretty sure App State spent some time in the top 25 overall. But App State absolutely gets in to the first round. So let's do Gonzaga versus App State. This is App State.
App State, I don't think there's much to say.
App State moves on. Let's see. App State moves into the second round to play the winner of Oklahoma and Missouri. This is a good one between two good teams, but again, it's got to be Oklahoma.
Absolutely. A lot of these are going to be gimmies. You will soon see, and you will also see more likely than not the Final Four will probably end up looking like the college football playoffs.
Yeah, pretty similar, but we have Appalachian State, who is, by the way, a 16 seed. So first upset right off the bat versus 8. So 16 App State versus Oklahoma 8. Moving on, we have Creighton versus UCSB. And then we get matchups like this with absolutely not football teams, and this is part of the fun of it. So Creighton or UCSB?
I don't really know what to say. I just moved Creighton on because they were the higher seed in basketball. So I'm like, you know what? University Central Santa Barbara, I'm sorry, but Creighton's more so of a household name to me. That may just because of basketball, but like I've never heard anyone reference you once besides this year, no disrespect. And like you're not even in a group of 5 conference. I don't know if the Big East is a group of 5, but it's one of the ones that gets talked about somewhat. Maybe not football sense, but basketball at least.
Yeah, so Creighton moves on for at least one round, but probably only one round only because next we have an ACC team, Power 5 team in Virginia versus Ohio, and I think Virginia's got to take this one.
Yeah, I think Ohio, there's really just not much to say about them. I think that there's some years where they're like okay and then just no, but Virginia's in the ACC, so that's automatically making them favorable.
Yeah, so we have the 5 versus the 4 here. Creighton versus Virginia in the second round for the West. We also have App State, Oklahoma, 16 versus 8 as the 2 second round matchups here. And then we get our second first 4 playing matchup that we have to decide. So that is going to be Wichita State versus Drake for the Western bracket. And I think this one Again, not football
Yeah,
teams, but it's probably got to be Wichita State.
I'd assume it'd have to be Wichita State, who is going to get absolutely clapped by USC.
Yeah, USC, another Power Five conference. So Wichita State doesn't make it far. But here we have 5, 4, and 6 moving on to the second round. 6, as in USC, moves into the second round in the West. Again, keeping with the West, Kansas versus Eastern Washington, going with higher seeds even still. This one has to be Kansas, as they are a Power Five conference team and in the Big 12, even though not the best team.
Not so good.
Not the best team. I think we still keep Kansas, though.
Yeah.
Listen, Power 5 team over Eastern Washington. Now, moving it on, keeping in the West, Oregon versus VCU, another obvious one.
Yeah, I mean, Pac-12, like looking at the Power Five conferences, it's one of the not so great ones in my opinion. You got like Big Ten. I don't really know how I'd rank them, but the SEC first. Why am I saying Big Ten first? No, SEC obviously first. Then you could probably throw in Big Ten, Big 12, ACC. The only reason ACC is really mentioned is because of Clemson. I'm sorry, you ACC fans, if there are any of you out there that aren't Clemson fans. And then just the Pac-12, which has not been good in many, many years.
Yeah. And then wrapping up the West, we have Grand Canyon versus Iowa, and another obvious one. We don't get any fun ones in the West, but this is clearly Iowa.
Yeah, Big Ten.
Yeah, so to wrap up the Western bracket in the second round, we have App State versus Oklahoma. That's going to be 16 versus 8. Then we have Creighton versus Virginia. That's going to be 5 versus 4. USC versus Kansas, 6 versus 3, and 7 Oregon versus 2 Iowa. So let's keep it going in the first round. We get another playing game for the right to get beaten by Michigan. We have
Yes.
the East, Mount St. Mary, and Texas Southern. I think this is Mount St. Mary. I think they do have a football program.
If they have a football program, that automatically puts them over most teams that do not. But it doesn't really matter because we already know they're going to get killed by Michigan.
Yep, Michigan moves on regardless. And honestly, not even a question. Mount St. Mary, Texas Southern, doesn't matter. Michigan moves on to the second round. And then over here, we have LSU versus Saint Bonaventure. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but
I think it's Saint Bonaventure. I'm not sure.
yeah,
But you know what we are sure about?
LSU wins.
Moving LSU on to the next round.
LSU. So we get a 1 versus 8 here. LSU 8 plays Michigan 1. Another easy one here. 5 Colorado versus 12 Georgetown.
Yep. There's a lot of these that are pretty easy, and I think that Florida State versus Colorado versus Georgetown is pretty simple. I mean, we don't get into so many complex matchups in the first round, to be honest with. There's a few, but we'll get into them later.
Yeah, Colorado takes the cake here. And then again, their opponent will be Florida State because they will be beating UNC Greensboro. Florida State, the 4 seed, so they will play the 5 seed, Colorado. So then the 6 seed, this is an interesting one, BYU, because this is a very interesting football team. 6, they are going to play another playing game, but this is an interesting one because it's going to be Michigan State. The playing game is going to be Michigan State versus UCLA. This one, I think, is going to be UCLA. I think we both agree on that. But the interesting part is UCLA versus BYU.
I think if we're basing it off of this season, I think we are not heading into next season, but this season, I think it's pretty obvious we go with BYU. Zach Wilson can literally shred up a defense. And UCLA, I don't even know if they made a bowl game this year, to be honest with you. But, it is what it is. I don't have so much faith in UCLA beating BYU. I get a group of 5 team. Even still, them, Coastal Carolina, 2 of the best Big 5 Big 5 schools that frankly probably could have made a significant impact but did not, sadly.
Yeah, the reason it could have been interesting is because UCLA is a Power 5 team and BYU is not, but still Zach Wilson pushes his team over the hump. Texas, as well, is going to come out on top over Abilene Christian. Number 3 seed Texas moves on to play BYU.
Really nothing to say.
Yeah, I mean, this first round is a little bit busy work as we get into all the really good teams, but I mean, we have some good matchups coming up in the second round. Uconn versus Maryland. Now, this is going to be an upset.
Hey, yeah, I got Maryland over Uconn. I'm not sure if Uconn has a football program. If they do, I apologize if you're a Uconn football fan, but I assume you're a Uconn fan not for football.
Yeah, yeah, probably not for football. They aren't very good in basketball, but definitely not for football. And then moving it on, finishing out the East bracket, it's
Hmm.
going to be, let's
I,
see, let's take a
I don't
look.
know.
It's going to be Iona 15 versus Alabama number 2. That one's a struggle.
Yeah, a very tough choice. I have no idea.
Yeah, so that one not hard whatsoever. Alabama is going to be moving on to play number 10 Maryland. So now get into the other side of the bracket, the southern bracket. Number 1 Baylor versus number 16 Hartford.
Um, I don't really think there needs to be an explanation as to why Baylor wins this.
Yeah, Baylor big 5 Power 5 conference in a Power 5 conference, and also they just made the Big 12 championship game a couple years ago. So I know it's based off 2020, but still recent success. Hartford, not
No
not no
success.
success. Now this next upcoming game
The
is
first challenging one.
the first real one. And if this was 2019, I think this is not only a different outcome, but a much harder decision. It's going to be 9 North Carolina versus, or excuse me, 9 Wisconsin versus 8 North Carolina. This is interesting because both these teams are very, very good, but also you could argue if it's 2019. Listen, my pick is North Carolina. I think they're a great team with Howell, all the weapons that they have on offense. But if it's 2019 with Jonathan Taylor, you could really make the case that Wisconsin wins this one.
Yeah, Wisconsin, a bit of a disappointing year after what we saw happen last year to them, because that was one of the best defenses in the history of college football. Then this year was not the best defense in the history of college football. So I think it's pretty evident as to why UNC ends up winning this one.
Yeah, so UNC goes on to play in the second round, and they'll be playing the winner of Villanova and Winthrop. And interesting matchup here because neither really has a very good football program, but Villanova has had some players come out into the draft. Winthrop, I'm pretty sure they don't even have a football program, so that's going to be Villanova.
Yeah, that's the only reason I really have them because I don't think Winthrop has a football program, and that is the only reason I have Villanova coming on top.
Yeah, that and also I'd say that that's probably a good reason not to have Winthrop moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the right to play Villanova will be held by the winner of Purdue and North Texas. And North Texas actually a little bit underrated as a football program. They have a very good draft prospect this season in Jalen Darden. I believe that's how you say his name. But also, Purdue has a pretty good wide receiver of their own coming out this year, Rondale Moore. So unfortunately, that cancels out for North Texas. And while North Texas does have a solid football program, Purdue, Power 5, good team in the Big Ten.
I actually I have North Texas winning this one.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. Okay, the Boilermakers.
All
I'm
right. On the
I'm
okay, on the official list, you want me to put North Texas over
no no
Purdue?
no no. Like we'll go. I think like sure. I don't really like. I prefer North Texas. I've I follow them on Instagram for I don't really remember what reason.
I'm a fan of their Instagram.
I'm a fan of their Instagram, and I also see on college football stats every week their wide receiver seems to be on top, and their offense seems to be near the top. And sure, it's probably because they're playing Conference USA teams, but the numbers are high. And we could put Purdue. I don't have like major issues. I'm not gonna cry because North Texas didn't advance, and I'm not gonna throw a major like get mad. But like I like it's a in my opinion, I think it could be close.
Okay, I could buy into that, but I think Purdue at this point is definitely the team that would move on. Now, as we get further down into the South bracket, 6 Texas Tech versus 11 Utah State, another Power 5 team versus a non-Power 5 team. Utah State, one of the better teams outside of the Power 5 conferences, but still, I think this one goes to Texas Tech.
Yeah, you better hope Utah State produces good players.
Keep it moving. Number 3. Keep it. I don't want to talk about that. Keep it moving on to Arkansas versus Colgate. Yeah, this one's Arkansas.
Yeah, it's an
Power 5.
SEC. It's an SEC team versus a Patriot League team.
Yeah, so Arkansas keeps it going with the trend of top seeds winning in the Southern bracket. Now, this one, I like this one. And, well, I think it's obvious who the winner is. It's one of the better matchups, or maybe the best matchup in the first round. That's going to be Florida versus Virginia Tech. Florida clearly moves on, but finally a good matchup.
Absolutely. I mean, we'll be seeing a lot better matchups, especially looking at what we have following it. We have number 2 Ohio State versus 15 Oral Roberts. Yeah, it's safe to say Ohio State will probably advance.
Yeah, Ohio State moving on to play Florida. Now, as we get into the final bracket of the first round, Illinois versus Drexler. Illinois has had some good games in the past couple of years. They are a Power 5 team in the Big Ten. So, again, not even sure if Drexler has a football program. So, this is clearly has to be Illinois.
Yeah, I don't really know how much success Illinois has found themselves in, but you know what? Okay, whatever. Like Drexel, I've never, I don't even know what conference they're in, so that's the end of the story. It's not like not Big Ten, not Group of Five. Well, out the pasture.
Yeah. Well, now this is another one. I hate to kick Loyola Chicago out because
Yeah.
we all know about their Final Four run that was simply incredible a couple years ago. But Georgia Tech, again, Georgia Tech, I mean, nothing special in football programs terms, but definitely better than Loyola Chicago.
I could be wrong, but I believe Georgia Tech is the team that is one of the one of 3 teams that runs the flex bone offense, I believe. If it's not them, I also know Georgia Southern does it, and Army. Definitely something to watch because I had a lot of fun looking at it. Just literally them just running the ball and killing teams. But now on to the next one, and oh baby, we already know who I have winning this. I don't know if Sam is annoyed because he knows I'm right, or it's because he has Tennessee winning. But no, wrong. Oregon State is winning this one.
So Oregon State 12 versus Tennessee 5.
Come on.
I went.
No.
This is tough. This is tough. On one hand, you have Jamar Jefferson. You have Oregon State, who beat Oregon.
Yes, that's their only good win this year.
On the other hand, you have Tennessee, who's an SEC team, gets beat up by Alabama, Florida, and Georgia every single season, but they're still in the SEC. I have to go Tennessee.
Just because they're in the SEC? Are you serious? That is a weak sauce reason to hate on Oregon State.
All right, I'll go Oregon State.
Woo!
Let's go. I'm flipping. Oregon State. Oh my God. Okay. Oregon State.
I know you loved every second of flipping it.
Oregon State, number 12, moves on and beats Tennessee. I'm not sure I'm so happy with that one.
No, I know you're not. I know you're pissed.
It is what it is. And moving on in the Midwest bracket, this is one that, well, I think it's clear that Oklahoma State, number 4, beats Liberty. This is another interesting one because Liberty has Malik Willis, who is a very underrated quarterback in college football. Very excellent dual threat quarterback. But Liberty, solid program, went 8-0, I think, to start out the season. But still, Oklahoma State is going to come out on top to play Oregon State in the second round. Oklahoma State moves on. Okay, then we have San Diego State versus Syracuse. This is another tough one, but I think San Diego State, this is a tough one. Neither team is great. Syracuse, Power 5, though.
Yeah, that's the reason I really had them over. San Diego State, known for Kawhi Leonard, not really anyone else. And if you're an athlete and you went to San Diego State, I just buried you. I apologize. I am sorry.
Yeah, so Syracuse, number 11, moving on to play West Virginia because West
Yeah.
Virginia, number 3, is going to beat Morehead State. Not even sure if they have a football program.
And I think the next one is pretty obvious too. We have Clemson moving on against Rutgers. Rutgers, one of the worst Power Five teams, for being honest. Like, not so great.
Yeah, and
And
then
then
this one
Houston.
has to be Houston, Cleveland State, number 2, Houston versus number 15, Cleveland State. Has to be Houston. I'm not even sure if Cleveland State has a football program. So that is going to wrap it up for the first round of predictions, or not predictions, but the bracket. So let's get into the second round. This is where the fun starts. We have App State versus Oklahoma. Now, this game, not the best, but Oklahoma is going to win this one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then let's keep it moving fast. Crichton falls to Virginia, clear and
Yeah.
obvious. Keep it going. So now we have Oklahoma versus Virginia in the third round in the Sweet 16. So that's going to be a fun matchup. Then we have USC, number 6, beating Kansas. I think that's clear.
Yep.
And then they are going to play Oregon, I believe,
Yeah.
6 versus 7. So that means the entire Sweet 16 for the entire Sweet 16 for the Western bracket is going to be set. It's going to be 8 Oklahoma versus 4 Virginia and 6 USC versus 7 Oregon.
Yep. That that's exactly what my bracket says. So we will move on to the next one. We have Michigan versus LSU. If we were basing this off of 2019, I think that it would be a bit more obvious. Both teams struggled kind of in
Yeah,
2020
this is tough.
because LSU fell off a massive cliff and Michigan, well, they were just disappointing. So I'm gonna hand it to LSU just because they have Jamar Chase, and apparently we're doing if draft prospects is a deal breaker, I think that Jamar Jefferson can tear up any defense. So
Yeah, I think I'd give it to LSU too. I was not impressed with Michigan. LSU didn't have the
when are you
best.
ever impressed with Michigan?
Yeah,
Like,
I
come
like
on.
even when Michigan goes like has like 2 losses or like 1 loss, like it's like all right, they'll lose in their bowl game. Like so I mean, yeah, not impressed with Michigan. LSU, not impressed either, but listen, they have Terrace Marshall. They had some good players like Jabril Cox, Derek Stingley Jr. So they come away with the upset over number 1 seeded Michigan. LSU is going to play the winner of Colorado and FSU. I think this is a really interesting one because I feel like there's no clear-cut better team here.
I think that's pretty fair. Like, Florida State had a pretty solid year, and I wouldn't say solid. They just didn't have like amazing years. So like I don't really know who to put ahead here, to be honest with you, and I don't really know if I have like any major issues with whoever we end up picking. But in my bracket, when I picked ahead of time, I have Florida State coming out on top, but I could be completely wrong.
Yeah, I could definitely get behind that. And now, because of that, in both brackets, in both the West and the East, yep, we are going to have LSU 8, or not LSU, but we're going to have 8 versus 4 as one of the matchups for the Sweet 16. Then moving it along, this one's obvious. We're going to have 3 Texas, I believe, beating BYU.
That's what I got. I mean, Texas, a little bit disappointing like most years, but is there always faith they'll be back? Yeah. Will they be back? I don't know. I kind of hope so, but I still really doubt it. Then on to another very obvious one where Alabama will beat down on Maryland.
Yep. So moving it on to the other side of the bracket now, it's going to be 8 UNC over 1 Baylor. Interesting point. A 1 seed has yet to win 2 games.
Well, I mean, look at the one seeds. They're not known for football. Like
Yeah, these one seeds clearly not built for football.
No, it is clear that if the football teams just showed up and decided to play, it would not be great. It
Yeah,
wouldn't be
not be great. But
great.
keep it going here. Purdue is clearly going to come out on top of Villanova here. And this is another obvious one. And still, we continue the trends of 8 versus 4 in the Sweet 16.
Yep, that's just the way it's falling. But who knows? There's a few very enticing matchups heading into the Sweet 16.
Yeah. And now in the other bracket, or not other bracket, but other part of this bracket, it's going to be Texas Tech versus Arkansas. And neither of these teams are great. So I couldn't really figure out who to put over here. But honestly, I think
I have Arkansas.
yeah,
I have
yeah,
Arkansas.
that's what I was just gonna say. I think I might want to go with Arkansas over Texas Tech here, and they will be playing Ohio State or Florida.
I mean,
This is tough.
it's tough because Florida was sadly missed out on the college football playoffs, but I have Ohio State. I think that the people that initially, when the playoffs were announced, I was in awe. I was in shock. I did not believe the fact that Ohio State made it over Texas A&M. Well, you know what? They beat Clemson, and that's enough for me to give them the bid over Florida.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Kyle Trask was exceptional. Florida was great in the regular season, but Ohio State was just better. I mean, they had some down games, but they still won. And the only game that they lost was to the best team in the nation in Alabama. So listen, Ohio State takes the cake here. They go on to play Arkansas in a 3 versus 2 matchup in the southern bracket. So now moving on to the last bracket of the second round. It's going to be Illinois versus Georgia Tech. I think this one's got to be Georgia Tech.
Yep, they will be dominating a team that is not very much known for their football. Let's just say that.
Yeah, for sure. And then again, Oregon State versus Oklahoma State. Now, Mitch, this is where it stops.
I'm sorry. No, I
Oklahoma.
can't. I
Are
just
you
needed the
serious?
one Oregon
Oh
State win.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
I just needed the one
No,
Oregon State win.
yeah,
No, no,
yeah.
no.
Oregon State's run is over. They are not the miracle team of our March Madness bracket. Oklahoma State number
But
4.
this is all chalk. This isn't who we think is gonna be a sleeper, because if there's
Well, yeah.
any sleeper in this, it would have to be Oregon State. If we look at all the lower seeded teams that won, I think Oregon State is the lowest seeded team we have winning. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I
So
believe that's true.
they would have to
But
be the only Cinderella.
yeah.
Clock struck midnight. I'm sorry.
So yeah, Oklahoma State moves on as the 4 seed to play Georgia Tech as a 9 seed. It's kind of a weird matchup, 4 versus 9. But then here, Syracuse versus West Virginia. This is, again, I feel like not that difficult. Going to be West Virginia.
Absolutely. And then the next one, also not so difficult, Clemson.
Yep, Clemson. So here, now we get into the Sweet 16. Let's get into the Sweet 16 matchups. Oklahoma versus Virginia. This one is going to be Oklahoma.
Yeah, Oklahoma really, and their opponent, because I don't think there's going to be any dispute, Oregon, that's going to be an interesting game. I think that might be one we have to discuss.
Yeah, USC, Oregon. Okay, let's talk about this one. USC, Oregon. This is difficult. I think USC wins.
Really?
Yes.
I was kind of leaning towards Oregon, but you know what? The one loss that set me off against Oregon, can you guess? The one loss they had that was so pathetic that
Oregon State.
they lost to Oregon State. So I remember watching it and I was just in awe. I'm like, there is no way this terrible Oregon State team is gonna win against Oregon. They won. I lost my stuff. I lost my freaking mind. No way.
Yeah, so I believe actually USC defeated Oregon throughout once in the season, but still, you look at their rosters going off just not based on that game, because if we were just take that game and plug it in, that would be no fun. But you look at the rosters and these teams, I think on paper, I think it makes much more sense that USC would come out victorious over Oregon. So USC goes on to play Oklahoma in the Elite Eight of the Western bracket. I like that. Now we move on. LSU versus FSU. This is a tough one. This is a tough one because not both teams were not that good in 2020.
Before we get into this, a little bit of breaking news. The Washington football teams have signed William Jackson. Now, this doesn't sound like such breaking news, but when the deal is 3 years, $42 million, I think that is a bit much.
Oh yeah, definitely for William Jackson. I think he had like a 69 or something PFF grade this season. Off the top of my head, something like that. Yeah, not good. He was fine.
But I don't know that he
Maybe
was
maybe a
worth.
maybe a cornerback two guy, like a solid cornerback two. But what is that? $14 million? Yeah, $14 million a year. Not a fan.
Oh,
Not a fan. Not yeah, no. But let's get back to the bracket here. LSU versus FSU. This is gonna be a tough one. I probably think LSU comes out on top.
yeah, I agree. A lot of
Yes.
agreeing today.
Yeah,
Of course,
surprising.
of course, the agreeing and then they're fighting over Oregon State. That seems to be a common trend.
Pretty typical. Pretty typical. So now we have OU versus USC and then LSU versus Alabama.
Yeah, Texas run stops here. That's
Yep.
it. Texas, you're
Texas.
not back. You
Yeah, I
are
know.
not back.
Texas had some hope, but just like every other year, they fall out to a better team. And that better team in this instance is going to be LSU. So on the left side of the bracket, we are going to have OU versus USC and LSU versus Alabama here coming up in the Elite Eight. Now, in the Elite Eight on the southern part of the bracket, it's going to be UNC versus Purdue, and this one has to be UNC.
I would have to agree. I think I tried to make the case earlier with the Boilermakers that they're not so great. Now I think it shows that they're not super great. And then, of course, they will be playing the Ohio State. I really don't think there's much to be said here. I think Arkansas is like a fine team, but the Ohio State has been dominant for years. So I think it's
Yeah,
pretty obvious that they
yeah.
move on
The
past the
Ohio
Ohio
State.
State. No. My friend, we're doing March Madness for real, and he's like, "Oh, you know who my Cinderella is? Ohio." I'm like, "Are you talking about the Ohio or just Ohio? Because there's a difference.
Yeah.
There's Ohio, Miami, and
And then
then
there's
there's
the Ohio
Ohio
State.
State.
The Ohio State. And they always
Now,
do a pause after the. It's
well,
great.
yeah, it makes them sound important. They tried to trademark it. It didn't work. But heading into the Midwest, we have Georgia Tech versus Oklahoma State. This is a gimme.
It's Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma State, and then another gimme, Clemson over West Virginia.
Yeah. So now in the playoffs, let's do a rapid or Elite Eight. Let's do a rapid fire here because I feel like none of these are that difficult. OU over USC.
Yeah, Oklahoma, of course, back in the playoffs, facing a familiar foe, of course, Alabama over LSU.
Yep, Alabama is going to be victorious. Surprise, surprise. Alabama gets into the Final Four. Now UNC versus OSU. OSU, they're a very good team. I love. Whoops, I dropped my pen. But
That was a loud pen.
yeah, I love UNC. They are a very good team. But listen, their run stops here.
It's over.
Yeah,
And then, of course, I wonder who wins Oklahoma State. Clemson. It will be Clemson. And as I mentioned, our Final Four looks like the college football playoffs. It kind of looks just like the college football playoffs. I think it's pretty evident what we have here. Of course, we have Oklahoma versus Alabama. I don't really think there's much to say here, truthfully. Alabama will end up winning this. And then Ohio State versus Clemson. This is an interesting one because in real life, we saw what happened. We saw that Ohio State shocked the world and won. Could they do it again? I don't think so. I think Clemson's the better team. So I have them, of course, going against Bama, everyone's favorite final matchup. And I'm sure Sam agrees because he'd be pretty stupid not to.
yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, you have these two matchups. It's just, of course, I agree. So moving it along, let's get into. Sorry, I cut out for a second. Where are we
It's all
now?
right.
So we are getting into. Did we do the Final Four already?
Yeah, we went through the Final Four. And then, of
Okay.
course, we have everyone's favorite everyone's favorite college football finals matchup, Alabama versus Clemson.
Yeah, so Alabama versus Clemson. Surprise, surprise. That's where we are. That's we are getting to.
What were
Alabama.
you expecting? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Like
Honestly, I mean, as soon as you saw Clemson and Alabama in the bracket, you knew it's gonna how it's end. I was kind of hoping that Clemson and Alabama would be on the same side, so that couldn't be how it ended. But Alabama Clemson, regardless, is the national championship. So I'm gonna stay pretty consistent with real world with how it came out. I think Alabama comes out and wins this one.
absolutely, Roll Tide winning the March Madness of college football, which I think that the college football has a huge opportunity to make something so great of a playoff, but we're stuck with a four-team type of deal, and the committee is what it is. I think we can have something very similar to March Madness and can be a lot more profitable as well.
For sure. They definitely make a lot more money. That's maybe where the NCAA's greed comes in to a
Of
good,
course.
good positive for
That's the only
for
time.
us.
That's the only time it does.
Yeah, but so Alabama is going to defeat Clemson here in our March Madness bracket, and that is going to wrap it up for, believe it or not, episode 40 of the First and Goal podcast. That is a big deal. Thank you guys for sticking with us through 40 episodes. Me and Mitch will be back here next Tuesday to talk more about free agency, pretty much wrap up free agency at that point and look ahead towards the draft. Also, catch me in 2 days' time on Thursday by myself for the First and Goal podcast with Sam Levine. Also, stay tuned for everything that I post on the YouTube page that can be found at First and Goal on YouTube for quicker analysis and opinion videos. So that is all for today. Until next time, Sam and Mitch signing off.